follow a similar format to this morning's panel. I have a question for each panelist, and then I'm going to have follow-up questions for the whole panel, and whoever wants to can jump in. So today we are fortunate to have with us the Honorable Scott Stringer, New York City's Comptroller, Ms. Rosemary Sinclair, First Vice President of the Council of School Supervisors and Administrators. I'll be referring to them as CSA, if that's okay. Diana Perez, the Vice President for Home-Based Child Care Services at Women's Housing and Economic Development Corporation, or WEDCO, as they are known. And a familiar face to everybody, Dr. James Parrott, Director of Economic and Fiscal Policy at the Center for New York City Affairs at the New School. So my first question is going to be for you, Mr. Comptroller. Your recent revolutionary report and proposal titled NYC Under 3 calls for more investment in the infant-toddler teaching workforce. Tell us more about your plan and what supports it proposes for infant-toddler teachers.
Well, first, let me start out by just saying thank you for giving all of us an opportunity to come together to talk about some of the most important people in our lives, and that happens to be our children and the work that people do raising them. And I want to just start off in thinking about NYC Under 3, what motivates me. So I was a parent later in life, and I remember my 2 kids going through a TWOS program and dropping off my kid at a child care center. And I was amazed because I would give my children, to people I never knew before, never had any interaction with. But when I looked at the center, there were kids that were so young, being nurtured by complete strangers. And it was really a beautiful moment, right? Because it was not something I would anticipate. What I learned later as controller, not as a scared dad, was that the people who were taking care of my kid were having trouble paying the rent and taking care of their own children. And as controller, I learned that 93% of employed child care workers are women, and 1 out of 4 live in poverty in New York City. So when we decided to invest in a real child care proposal that would triple the number of kids having access to child care, going from 23,000 to 85,000, we decided to broaden our idea. And part of that idea was to make sure and include in a multi-million-dollar program, a 5-year, 6-year ramp-up, we would immediately include $50 million in the first year of implementation to increase compensation for child care workers, no ifs, ands, or buts. And we would invest $100 million in the first year for startups and renovation, expansion grants for infant toddler providers so they can sustain and grow their business, and $25 million each year to support professional development, because it's time for the city to recognize that our child care workers are the highest professionals we can have, because they're taking care of the most vulnerable children in the system, and we have to come to terms with that. So the victory that Henry and others have attained, the Daycare Council, CSA, and all the other people at the table, this is a real opportunity to change the rules of the road, to invest in expanding child care, but also expanding the professionalism of child care, paying people so they never have to go home at night wondering about their own children, wondering about their own homes. And that's the basis for NYC Under 3. It's a realistic plan to triple the number of child care slots, invest $650 million over a 6-year period, including money for capital improvements to end child care deserts. We have legislation that would pay for this, sponsored by Senator Ramos, Assemblywoman Latrice Walker. So we are getting this done in this broad coalition. That outlines the plan, but it also invests in the teachers and the child care workers.
Thank you. My next question is for you, Ms. Sinclair. And if you want to get up, you can. But, center directors are certified teachers and have a whole host of administrative responsibilities, in addition to sometimes teaching in the classroom if a certified teacher is out. Yet, the most recent pay parity victory, center directors could end up making less than the teachers they supervise. What advocacy and supports do center directors need to get the recognition they deserve?
Okay, thank you. I think I will get up. First, I want to say thank you to Andrea, who, when I came on board, you don't start yet, right? Don't start the time yet. When I came on board, I'm just 3 years in, 2 years as a vice president, first vice president of CSA. And Andrea took me in, and she has been so good to me. And we're supposed to have our negotiation, her on one side and me on the other side. But I just want to say that she has been really, really great. So let's just give her a round of applause. And her team, I must say, because our president, Mark Cannizzaro, and our executive vice president, Henry Rubio, told me I must say hello to you, so hello from them. It is a great pleasure for me to stand before you today because this is a critical situation for all members of the union and outside of the union, but I'm going to speak about my members, the directors and the assistant directors. I am really grateful to stand before you again because I've learned within the short time I have been on roller skates, learning about this whole situation with the directors and assistant directors. We have over 16,000 members, so we serve those members that are in the Department of Education, the leadership there, but we also serve members in city-funded early childhood centers. And no one knows how important early childhood education is to the city more than those who actually work with the children, those who are on the front line. And that absolutely includes our members, our directors and assistant directors. By now, we are all familiar with the copious amount of research that confirms that there's positive impact on having a highly effective early childhood education, how it can help the neighborhood, the communities, and especially our children. With strong early childhood programs, it results in great social adjustments for our youngsters, fewer referrals to special education, and that's part of my portfolio in the Department of Education, so I know a little bit about that. Higher scores on future standardized literacy and math tests, and a lesser likelihood of grade repetition as the year goes by. Of course, certain conditions must be, you should have small size classes, full day programs, strong age appropriate curriculum, parent involvement, and most importantly, well-trained leaders and teachers. From the moment that our mayor de Blasio and his administration launched universal pre-K, CSA has applauded it, supported it, and then it went to 3K for all. And then we saw the unintentional consequences. It has caused a strain on our city-funded early childhood centers in terms of recruitment and retention of students and teachers. CSA has long advocated that adequate and fair pay are fundamental in attracting and retaining the best educators at this and any level in education, in the education system. And for years, our union and our members, some are here now, have consistently fought alongside fellow educators, advocates, activists, and elected officials for pay parity among early childhood educators. In February 2017, and that's when I came on the board, that same month, the city assisted CSA and Daycare Council to have an agreement to provide long overdue financial raises for our members. Unfortunately, the contract was the first raise that our member had received in 10 years. I said 10 years. We are really proud of our contract that we negotiated for our dedicated members, but they have gone without deserved pay raises for so long that today much more still needs to be done on their behalf. The contract also successfully maintained health and welfare fund contributions, increased the pension rate because of the fact that increased base salary made them have increase with the pension, addressed and clarified the use of sick leave, and led to something that was great and still is great, is the new Career Ladder program. CSA and Daycare Council both wanted to create opportunities for directors and assistant directors to maintain and further their professional development through the avenue of colleges, universities, workshop, and conferences. And so we've been paying, we say partial payment, but at this time we've been paying the entire amount of our early childhood directors' tuitions. Now, the state stated that if you have a teacher certification, SBL, SDL, for city funding and outside and in the DOE, that you must have something called continuing teaching and leader education. We call it CTLE hours. So what we've done, working with Daycare Council, we developed a Directors Institute, which offers free, yes, I said it, free professional learning opportunities, and we have state-approved providers to assist our members in obtaining the CTL hours certificates. We have many courses such as, or workshops such as, organizing a successful early childhood center, teacher mentorship, technology, emotional intelligence, and multilingual learners, and the list goes on. As a result of our Career Ladder program efforts, we are proud that 2 of our directors have completed college graduate degrees with honors. That should deserve a round of applause. And we expect 4 additional graduates by the end of this year, and I believe 2 are in here right now. We are looking forward to the other enrollees achieving similar success. And I have 3 more minutes. So I want you to know that in recent years, we have joined Empire Campaign for Children, Daycare Council, DC 1707, to different rallies and hearings, and we argue again and again that we need pay parity. So I just want you to know, for our directors and assistant directors, our contract expired September of this year. So our attention and focus are towards securing an equitable contract for them. These individuals do so many work, so much things, and it mirrors those of the Department of Education. Their jobs have become so complex that you have to continue to work with them and help them to have the lifestyle that they truly deserve. Not just better salaries, but benefits and all the things they need to have for their children also, as you so eloquently stated earlier. So we're here for this fight. We have gone to hearings. We have gone to lobby in Albany. We've done many things to try to get to this pay parity. And when we go to negotiation, Andrea, we definitely expect that there will be pay parity for our members. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Sinclair.
Well done.
Yeah. My next question is for you, Ms. Perez. WEDCO has a large network of family child care providers, including legally exempt. So you're very aware that family child care providers are often overlooked as a key part of the early childhood workforce. So how much should family child care providers be paid? And how does that link to the quality of care that family child care providers give?
I'm going to follow.
You want to go up there?
Oh, I'm short. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Andrea, for inviting Family Child Care to be part of this panel discussion. WECA is a community development social service organization based in the South Bronx. We were founded more than 25 years ago, working with home-based child care providers, helping individuals to build and grow successful home-based child care businesses throughout the city, while improving the quality of child care that's available to New Yorkers. More than helping to connect families with child care options, the biggest part of our work is really to support home-based child care providers in order to help their businesses thrive, while ensuring they are providing safe and nurturing learning environments for children. As we know, an overwhelming majority of child care providers in the United States provide care in their homes, making home-based child care a critical component of the child care landscape. Family child care providers are notoriously underpaid, especially when you take into account the average salary of individuals holding similar positions in school-based settings. Is there an ideal universal wage for home-based child care providers? The answer is not that simple. To establish fair wage, we must take into account several factors, including the type of care, ages served, professional qualifications, geographic location. We must also consider the true cost of child care. What is certain is that we must move towards pay equity to ensure that family child care workers can provide quality care while earning livable wages that allow them to pursue their goals and raise their own families with dignity. Salary parity also helps providers move up the quality spectrum. But just how do we measure quality in the first place? Because home-based child care quite literally takes place in the home, there is a common perception that it is inferior and lacks quality. To debunk these notions, it's necessary to define what constitutes quality care, while recognizing that there is a range of quality in home-based settings, just as there is in other educational settings. Establishing a clear definition and instituting a rigorous process to assess and support quality are essential steps towards making greater investments in home-based child care, in child care providers, and in the development of children and families who use home-based child care. At the same time, we should be doing a better job at the local, state, and federal levels to obtain and disseminate data regarding quality in home-based child care settings, so that we can better tailor our approaches to supporting this invaluable sector. As part of our work at WECO, we work closely with our network providers to help them move up the quality spectrum and help them achieve their professional and educational goals. To that effect, we provide training on financial management and how to develop their business plans. This is important in order to understand the true cost of their services. Unfortunately, most providers are not aware of the true cost of running their child care business, because a lot of the providers that we work with provide subsidized care. They rely only on the reimbursement rate prescribed by New York State Office of Children and Family Services, OCFS. The maximum payment rate for child care subsidies across New York State are determined largely by a market rate survey conducted by OCFS. During this survey, which includes a significant sample of child care providers in all counties, providers disclosed their rates. Of course, rates vary significantly across different areas. A child care provider in the Bronx does not charge the same amount as a provider in Westchester County. It is important to note that most child care subsidy comes from the Federal Child Care Development Block Grant, CCDBG, which aims to ensure that low-income families have equal access to child care as families who are able to pay market rate without subsidies. According to OCFS Division of Child Care Services in 2019, New York State used the 69th percentile of the market rate to set maximum payment rates. In other words, according to OCFS, those rates should allow parents to secure child care in roughly 69% of the licensed and registered child care settings. In 2019, most weekly, daily, part-day rates for all types of care in all county groups increased, while some stayed the same. Most hourly rates either increased or stayed the same, and there were decreases in the rates for school-aged children attending center-based programs in New York City. However, the fact that the maximum payment rate established in certain areas like the Bronx is not enough to fund the true cost of running a child care business tells us there's a problem. Oftentimes, child care providers are considering what families in their neighborhoods are able to pay instead of taking into account what it truly costs to run their business. We need to continue to work to empower providers so they gain a better understanding of what it costs to run their business. Ultimately, all providers should have a business and marketing plan in place so they can move towards financial independence. At the same time, we should be advocating at the local, state, and federal levels so that maximum payment rates take into account the true cost of providing high-quality child care, rather than relying solely on a market rate survey. This is necessary in order to move towards pay equity that honors the expertise of family child care providers and the increased expectations of their work. Salary parity is a social justice issue because the early childhood educators who are being unfairly impacted by the new rates and expectations are the ones on the bottom of the economic ladder, mostly in underserved boroughs like the Bronx. Family child care providers in New York City are not only facing the burden of increased work expectations and professional development goals, but they are also facing the pressure of competition from the expanded pre-K for all programs. A recent data brief from the New School Center of New York City Affairs examines the impact of New York City's free public preschool programs on home-based child care programs. The author concludes, that's Kendra, that the availability of free pre-K for 3- and 4-year-olds is not only causing child care centers to lose spots for kids within those ages, but is also putting at risk the available slots for infants and toddlers. However, pre-K for all might be an alternative for some families. But for typical working families who might require before and after care, the family child care setting continues to offer the best solution. Since family child care providers typically offer extended care and can provide more flexibility to working families, it is important for us as advocates to continue working to present family child care as high-quality, affordable alternative for families in our communities. Part of this work would involve training providers on how to develop effective marketing plans and campaigns. In conclusion, we need to shine a light on the services and contribution that family child care providers make in their communities. We know that they are often left out of the conversation around child care policy, funding, and supports towards that end. We're happy to see New York City has already taken some steps to bring family child care providers into the fold for 3K for all, recognizing them as significant and valuable contributors in the field of child care. However, more needs to be done. We need to advocate so that providers are included in the dialogue and planning phases so that they receive equal opportunities to engage in the child care workforce. Our advocacy, public information campaigns must seek to raise awareness that value that family child care adds to the child care landscape. Likewise, our advocacy efforts should work towards eliminating the segregation that happens in the child care field, which limits child care workers' access to funding and support. Finally, the current market rate, subsidy market rate for family child care, has been based on a market rate survey that does not truly reflect the cost of care. The rates are still too low, which prohibits the providers in low-income communities from investing proper resources to support increased quality. Additionally, the rates do not support the increased requirement for 3K providers or address extended day services that are paid at the same rate. While there is an increase in the current market rate, we must recognize that quality care costs money, and providers who are themselves predominantly women of color continue to be paid low wages that keep them in poverty. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Parrott, you just released a report that chronicles the advocacy that led to the most recent pay parity victory. Can you tell us 3 strategies that happened that led to that big win, and what can we take away for our advocacy for infant toddler teachers, center directors, and family child care providers?
Is that all I get to talk
Yeah.
about? Oh, okay.
You get to talk more
That's-
after,
I
though.
can take 10 minutes
I
to
have
do
more.
that. First off, I'd like to thank Andrea, Lisa, and the Daycare Council for pulling together this conference, and more importantly, being an important part of the glue that held together the Campaign for Children and all of the public education and lobbying activity that's taken place over the last many, many years to get us to this point. I undertook to write this report titled The Road to and From Salary Parity, because it's clear that what's been achieved in New York City is historic. Historic not just for New York City, but historic in a national context. Marcy's spoken to the importance of that. So I thought it was good, being a public policy person, for public policy analysts in New York City and in other places to have a good understanding, as good as I could portray it, of the factors that led to get us to this point, but also recognizing the distance that we have to go from this point. The story doesn't start in 2014, of course. There's a long history to the Head Start program, to child care workers being unionized in New York City. There was really a need to explain why the District Council 1707 and CSA did not have a contract for 10 years, affecting all of the workers in the early childhood education sector. So I think it was important to identify some of those roots and to talk about the factors that changed that situation. Fundamentally, it was an historic degree of unity and concerted and strategic organizing on the part of the sector, and a lot of people in this room had a lot to do with that. The Daycare Council, of course, and many others were key leaders in that effort. It took enlightened public officials. After all, we had a mayor who had the vision to campaign on. It was the core of his campaign in 2013 to achieve universal pre-K. And, in an incredible demonstration of leadership, he made a great start on that within the first year that he was in office. And of course, as I tried to relate in the report and others have said, that could not have been done without the cooperation and the support and the leadership of the early childhood education sector, as it's reflected in hundreds of nonprofit organizations in New York City. The city could not have done it, could not have made that big step without the close involvement and cooperation of the nonprofit sector. But it took a lot to pull it all together and make it happen. There were a lot of enlightened officials in the city council who were educated by the Campaign for Children and its allies on this issue, recognized the importance of that, and put their support behind it. Finally, the unions that had been involved, District Council 1707 for many years, and then I think a real pivotal point was when DC 37 combined with 1707 over the course of the summer. It was a real treat to have Henry speak at lunch. Henry was a key player in figuring out how to resolve those contract negotiations and dealing with a complicated legacy of problems that had been inherited. Not solving all of those, but making a credible step forward in many of those areas. And of course, that resulted in these phenomenal 20 to 40% pay increases for certified teachers, which is unheard of in a national context in terms of the sort of pay increases that nonprofit teachers in the early childhood education sector have seen around the country. But we all recognize, and this is one of the main themes of the report, and it's been talked about a lot this morning, that it was only starting pay salary parity, and that a lot remains to be achieved to make that really comprehensive salary parity. Marcy did an excellent job of talking about the various components in terms of the length of the school year, the benefits, the pay for all of the support staff, and a lot of speakers have talked about the importance of having a robust career ladder. It's important to achieve salary parity for teachers who are certified, but what do you do and what's your commitment to develop others to build a pipeline to do that? And in New York City, it doesn't just happen by relying on the higher education sector to deliver committed, community-based teachers to the doorsteps of nonprofits. Teachers come in as assistant teachers and teachers' aides, and they need to be supported as they continue their education and professional development. And as many speakers have recognized, that's not so easy to do when you're a parent yourself and you're raising children and you have a family to take care of. It was heartening to hear Josh Wallach talk about how the career ladder system needs to come to where the workers are and change the way certifications are administered and change the kind of supports that are provided to help workers advance up a career ladder. Many of them want to do that. They need to do that. And with the headway that's been made on salary parity, there will be a financial reward in addition to a professional reward for the people who make it up that career ladder. So a lot of things have been coming together. The road from salary parity contains lots of challenges. You've heard about some of those in the 0 to 3 sector. I laud the comptroller for his revolutionary, as Mike characterized it, report, which not only addresses a lot of the things we've talked about, but makes a case for why there need to be new investments to expand the access that more people have to early childhood education. Now, we're lucky that in the Democratic primary process, many of the candidates are talking about that. But here, Scott Stringer's report came out many months ago and outlined a vision for New York City. Now, to realize that vision, it's not going to be easy. One of the themes I tried to strike in the report was that good policy ideas by themselves do not carry the day. If that were true, we would have been having this conference in 2015, having achieved salary parity in 2014, because it was the right thing to do and a good policy idea. It's going to take a lot of organizing, and given my understanding of how institutions and political forces unfold in New York City, it seems to me fairly obvious that the sector can continue to make significant headway, provided that it takes advantage of all of the resources at its disposal. And I think you heard from Executive Director Garrido about the resources and the political clout that DC 37 brings to this issue and to this table. And I think that could make all the difference in the world in making significant headway on a lot of the issues that people have prioritized and talked about today. It's not going to happen. The union can't keep doing that unless it expands its membership base within the early childhood education sector. Henry also has a vision. His vision is to organize the entire $6.6 billion publicly funded human services contract sector in New York City. That's 110,000 workers overall. And let me just end on an individual priority of mine. A lot of people recognize the value of having an early childhood career ladder in the early childhood sector. There's not now such a career ladder in the broader human services sector in New York City. There's been a commitment on the part of the city to put up funding to make that happen. The city has just been moving at a speed beyond slow in making that happen. And a lot needs to happen to sort of bring those resources and that potential to the broader workforce in human services sector. But today, let's focus on the early childhood sector. And, I think, a lot has been achieved in 2019, and there's a lot of energy here to continue to address and advance that campaign. Thank you.
Thank you. So my next question is for the entire panel, but perhaps we could start with the comptroller, just to bring it full circle. Funding an equitable early childhood system that recognizes all types of educators is inevitably going to be expensive. How do we build public support and the public will for funding an equitable system?
Well, I think the momentum is starting to be on our side, as Dr. Parrott points out. When you have on the debate stage, as crazy as that debate stage may be, we are hearing candidates talk about universal child care and how to start grappling with an issue and a science that has now become clear. 0 to 3 is where 80% of the brain development is. In our proposal, we talk a lot about that, but we also talk about the fact that were we to implement an expanded early child care program, we calculate that we would send 20,000 people back into the workforce, mostly women and people of color. They would end up paying a whole lot of taxes, earning a lot of money, and that could end up paying for itself. Now, I understand that it's more complicated than that government and the private sector has a role to play. And part of what we're thinking about is not simply talking about universal child care in New York State or New York City, but a realistic plan to pay for it, because the only way this is going to work is if we have a plan and navigate Albany. So when we announced NYC Under 3, we sat with Jessica Ramos, who has the chair of the Labor Committee. She has now introduced legislation to pay for this program. We would essentially ask the top 5 companies, the top 5% of companies with the highest payroll taxes, to pay a slight increase in those taxes. It would amount to $650 million. We would ramp this program up over 5 years. It's realistic, and we're doing this now, recognizing that everything won't happen today, but we can, down the line, create the revenue that implements the program. And I do want to say that Dr. Parrott's right. We really should give Mayor de Blasio a whole lot of credit for pre-K. And the sequel, 3K. But I want to talk about the prequel, right? And that's 0 to 3. So Josh and others in the administration and labor really showed how you build out a program. Like it's in front of us, right? You look at pre-K deserts. You look at how we can create a 5-borough program. We have to do the same thing with 0 to 3. We identified in our report the child care deserts in New York City, which are immense. Even if you can afford $21,000 a year, it's very likely you can find a 0 to 3 opportunity, which is incredible. We haven't invested capital dollars. We haven't looked at how to close those deserts down, and we haven't linked a funding stream to an expansion. And again, when you listen to the labor leaders and the activists, and you look at who's on this panel, they talk very passionately and specifically about pay parity, how we professionalize the profession. And the best way, I think, to do this is to fundamentally change how we educate kids in the city. Go right to the beginning, start 0 to 3. Once you expand it, the thirst out there is going to be immense. And then imagine all the people who talk about equality and equity. Imagine a 0 to 3 program where you don't have to make over $100,000 or $200,000 to access it for your kid. Imagine having a program for families that make less than $100,000. You have an opportunity to have subsidized child care. And if you make less than $50,000 or $26,000, you get free child care. That changes the future of every child. So here's what we're talking about. Professionalize the profession. Give the poorest people in the city equality. There should be no difference in education based on zip code and income. We all agree with that, right? When we sent our kid to a 0 to 3 program, both our children, as 2 W-2 employees who make a reasonably good living, we emptied out our savings. I'm lucky because I could empty out that savings. But imagine somebody who's a single parent or somebody who, 2 people struggling, who don't quite make enough money. They're not emptying out their savings. They're basically saying to somebody, you stay home because we can't do anything until we get to pre-K. That's the old math. The new math is if we want to get kids on the starting gate, it's all up to you, right? So we have to build the system together. Why should there only be 23,000 slots in a city with a whole lot of kids? When we talk about 85,000 kids, think about how little that is. But it's a start. So I think that the Daycare Council, the organizations represented, we have a real challenge. We have science. We have pre-K and 3K as a guide for implementation. There's nothing wrong with taking the ideas that work and then bringing the system to a real expansion. And I think if we do this, we will start seeing more equity in education, more fairness, more opportunity for people to go back to the workforce. And maybe we could end up being the city that leads the nation, because I do think, depending on the outcome in November, I do agree with you, we will have a universal child care proposal in the United States Congress. But the success of that program will be the big cities, New York City, LA, Chicago. We got to show that this can be done. And if we can, we'll help municipalities all over the country and every child in the country based on who they are, not how much money their parents make.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to chime in? Okay. All right, great. You want to? Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I would like to chime in. Thank you for what you stated. I was just sitting here thinking about education, and I'm talking about educating the public, the communities, because when I go around to different places, I still hear about we need pay parity for teachers, which we love teachers. I was a teacher for 12 years in Department of Education, but I don't hear about even the individuals that Henry spoke about, you know, the supervisor and so forth, but I'm here on behalf of my directors and assistant directors. You really don't hear that much talk on the leadership, right? Our directors and assistant directors. You know, we know that everyone talks about the fact about the presidential election, but this year there's maybe some change of guards when it comes to Congress people, assembly people, and so forth. And we have to educate everyone to let them know the importance. Because you know it, this place is full with individuals that know what's going on, but we have to go out and educate everyone about the fact that there is a need for pay parity. Because even though we're talking about it, when you sit down and really speak with someone, they have another idea about it, you know, and it's really not the same. And they're saying, oh, well, we didn't know about the directors and assistant directors, the situation they go through, and everyone in the city-funded early childhood centers, what they go through. So I think we need to really continue to educate. Don't stop. Continue to educate and come together and let us work as one, because that's how we're going to get things done.
Thank you. No? I can ask another question. So you three are up here representing three very different sectors, right? Government, academic, nonprofit, union. So we've seen here that there's a theme about unity. So how do we unify in order to advocate for this next step, the infant toddler teachers, the center directors, the family-based care? How do we unify? Go ahead. Yeah.
I think what is happening here today is one of the first steps towards unifying the sectors, you know, presenting these opportunities for us all to come together and talk about those common issues that we have and how we can approach them effectively as a unit that is really fostering early care and education in the city.
That was a very. I'm going to have one more question, and then I think we have time for questions from the audience as well. So if you have them, I think we have someone who can come around and collect them. I'm looking for. We have someone who can come around and collect them. So my last question: given how much more work needs to be done to build an equitable early childhood system, I want to come around to each of you. What's the priority right now? Well, now it's a tough question. What's the priority that we can all rally behind? No, you do what you got to do. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll start. Well, so we know that some things are probably best dealt with at the collective bargaining table, and that discussion's not going to occur again for a couple of years. What can start right now, I think, and there's clearly an active discussion on this, is how to make more robust the career ladder. And Henry spoke about some of the need to extend the certification time period. Josh talked about the need to help bring the career ladder opportunities to the teachers where they are, and so on. So I think there's clearly a critical need to do that, to help more of the women of color who are in the system already get the skills and the education and the certification they need, so they can benefit from these higher salaries as they rise. So I think focus, administrative and organizing focus on how to address the career ladder challenges can be a top priority.
Yeah.
One observation, in addition to the strong labor component that is bringing us pay parity and other issues, I think from a constituency building perspective, we have to prioritize the child. Because when you start telling parents and constituencies that children need childcare. It's necessary for their development. And then you start telling the story, well, in order to achieve that, we have people who are providing that childcare who, by any measure, don't even make minimum wage. And when you talk about quality childcare, the people can't afford to stay doing the work they love. People who take care of a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old, and they're not your children, are very special people. I mean, they're people that do the most amazing work. And the more we talk about the child and fairness, that I do think the constituency will build for investing in providers and doing the work that has to be done. So I always think when you start the conversation off and you talk about how a child needs childcare, and then you tell this story, it's not a story that people are going to tolerate if we get the message out.
Thank you. All right, so I have some questions from the audience. How do nonprofit, publicly funded centers, or I assume some providers as well, how do they have a seat at the table? That's a tough question. How do they have a seat at the table? The city-funded, the publicly funded centers.
Well, as a union, they have a seat at the table through us. Our members have a seat at the table through us. And as we continue with our political action committee and we go around, we are mentioning our members constantly. And we're asked to be a part of so many different task force and committees. We were asked to be on the early childhood blue ribbon with the regent. We went there. One of the young ladies is here, and she was on a panel. So there she goes. And we're asked to be on so many different, again, committees. And then we continue to speak the word. Like our comptroller said, tell the stories. And that's how we get to the table.
From the nonprofit, we engage all of our providers, our member affiliates, in a lot of dialogue and conversation. And we hope to bring their voices to the table, but we also encourage them to speak with their labor union and to ask their support in raising their voices so that they're part of the conversation.
Thank you. I have several questions about directors. How do we give directors relief from the 10-hour days, and often when they have no certified teachers on site, they are the only certified teacher?
Okay.
How do we give them relief?
Okay, so I get this question all the time. I get calls on this. The first thing is that we tell our members is, you do not work 10 hours without compensation and without you volunteering to work the 10 hours. We've had, and I just want to shout out Marvin Pope, who's our legal counsel. Just raise your hand. Give him a round of applause because he works really hard with us. So what we have been doing and we've done, we've asked our members, those who are working 10 hours, we said, we send out a survey and we ask them to tell us if they're not receiving compensation for the extra work. Because we consider it, I have the mindset of you work the hours, they're supposed to work 38 hours per week. And if they're working extra time, it should be what they want to do. And it should be that they get compensated for it. So we've asked many individuals, and Marvin was on that task last year, making sure that we contact our sponsoring boards to say that these individuals must get compensation. Now for having a certified teacher in the building, your sponsoring boards are supposed to have these individuals in the building. So if you don't have it, please contact me. I know I don't represent everyone here, so contact your union. And if you don't have a union, then you could talk to me after. Okay? So they have to do that.
Okay, the next question. Children of different backgrounds not only have unequal access to quality early education, they are also, in the most cases, in segregated settings. Can investing in equity for early educators also promote integrated classrooms? So the question is about integration.
I'm going to take a stab at that.
Oh yeah, go for it.
I think that's a very challenging question. I don't know, is this on? I don't know if it's on. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. It's a challenging question because when we talk about integration, we have to look at communities and where children live. And if you're looking at low-income communities, the chances of integrating classrooms is slim to none, simply because the economy and the environment doesn't allow for it. So I think it's, we really want to work towards having more diversity in our classrooms and having more equitable opportunities, but it really starts with ensuring that all of our children have access to first true choice, and that true choice is always about quality. And if we can increase quality across the board, then the integration issue in the classroom in communities should be a non-issue because it would be equal access to education and early care.
I just I met with our Deputy Chancellor, Josh Wallach, on this because I saw that when they did the RFP, it talked about there's a little line about diversity, you must have diversity, and that also helped you to win the RFP, right? Win the RFP. And I said to him, with his lawyer present, and my lawyer present, why are we asking that when in certain neighborhoods you just have those that you have, right? How is that fair to say that, you have to have diversity or you cannot, or you would not have, your better chance if you have, a better chance of getting this if you have diversity? And he said, good question. I'm thinking about it. So I don't know if that is going to be something that they're going to continue to use, but realistically, when you can do it, of course, it's wonderful. But when you can't do it, you shouldn't be penalized for it. That's the point.
Thank you. What changes do you perceive in the future that will affect home-based leaders who may or may not have a CDA? This is a question for you.
This is for me. So the current structure for home-based child care providers is that those that are first of all, we should be clear that subsidy isn't the only driver for home-based child care. And so there is a private population that also utilizes home-based child care as the care of choice, and they pay privately for that type of care. So those families who are private pay can continue to use a provider who does not have a CDA, right? So there is that factor, and providers who are not going to be taking 3K children specifically are still eligible to be paid with subsidy dollars, in addition to under the contract care, in addition to voucher dollars for child care services. But there is going to be some challenges when they have to compete with 3K programs. And so that may mean that they are not competitive enough to retain 3-year-olds in their programs, and they've lost 4-year-olds already, which means that we may see a lot of closures in licensed and regulated family child care homes, which will also have some adverse impact for infant toddler care, because most infant toddler care happens in a home-based environment. So there is the potential that we will be seeing a decrease in the availability of slots for child care overall in family child care. And we have seen some closures already.
Okay. I'm afraid we have to wrap up. Thank you can we get a round of applause for our panelists? Thank you so much for joining us today and giving us your perspectives. I think everybody here really appreciated it. Thank you. Next, we're going to have my executive director, Andrea Anthony, come up, and she's going to wrap up.